Hello future people, welcome to Getting Tabled. I'm Jason the Bruce, coming from PAX. We're going to be... Hello future people, I'm here with Murray, one of the designers behind Terminus, a SpacePunk RPG, a game so good you made your own genre.
It's true, we decided to create pretty much everything in the game as an original, so brand new dice system built from the ground up, brand new combat system built from the ground up, and as you said, we even decided to create our own genre specifically for this game, just to kind of drive home that originality.
Yeah, so when we was talking originally, you were saying about how it's both very serious and very silly. And, like the players and the party can essentially kind of go in the direction that they want.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the world itself has all of those really lovely, rich tones around the nature of humanity that comes from cyberpunk and the kind of Marxist undertones and capitalistic structures and that kind of stuff, mixed with the epicness of space opera and the kind of frontiers land and the big scoping stories, but kind of fed through a very socio-political lens. So the world itself and the way in which the world is textured and colored is very serious, but the game mechanics and the way in which they are structured are very silly and very fun and very over the top, and they kind of lead to players to go down a really deep or explorative narrative wormhole, and often that ends up being things that you don't expect, so it lends to that kind of comic and outrageous elements, and when those two things mix, you get a really nice blending of both the elements. So you can slide either way. It's a game of extremes. Take it as silly as you want or take it as serious as you want. The system will lean into your desires.
Yeah, and you was explaining that there's a modularity to the rule system where if a certain part of it's a bit complicated for the table that you have, you can kind of maybe take that bit out and it still works together. And there was upgrading of the dice as opposed to just having levels of certain things.
Yeah, absolutely. So the modularity of this game, everything in it was designed to be two things. One is ultra flexible, and the other thing is as creative as possible. And with that, we found that just like every kind of system in it, we wanted to compartmentalize so that they would work together really efficiently, but you could pull out anything that you didn't like. So you can run this game with just the core dice system and it will function perfectly. You can take the whole weapon system out and it will function perfectly. If you don't like the way the class system works, you can take that out and it will work perfectly. Even individual rules themselves of like how to buy weapons, how to have weapons delivered to you, all that kind of stuff can be removed or added in as your desire. The game will flex with whatever you need, and it is designed to kind of be approachable like that. Very simplistic on the surface, but as you go deeper, it just gets richer and richer, but that can be overwhelming for people if you have too many options. So we wanted to also give them the chance to go, no, because that's just as important in a tabletop role-playing experience as going, yes.
Yeah, especially like house rules is essentially, especially in RPGs, is something we all do anyway. So having a system that's actually designed to encourage it is a nice idea.
Absolutely, and that's a huge part for us. It is all about context. So just be kind of building into that, I'll talk a little bit about the core dice, if you want. Yeah. So the way in which our system works, all of our expertises, which are like your raw skill sets of what you can achieve, things like brawn, coordination, logic, that kind of stuff, they're all broken into three aptitudes, so three major groups: body, mind, and specialty. And each one of those have their own dice, their own independent dice. And as you put in modifiers into each of the expertise and grow them, the dice itself of the aptitude will grow as well. So if I just put points in body because I want to get swole, but I leave my mind behind, I'm going to have like a D12 in body, but maybe a D6 in mind, a D8 in specialty. So they grow from a D6, D8, D10, D12, D16, then D20. And what that allows you to do is really lean into a particular aspect. So if you're a really mind-focused person, you can stack a lot of points in there and have a lot of mind problem-solving skills. So it's going to increase your statistical likelihood of achieving an event at the same difficulty, but it'll also raise the glass ceiling of what is possible for you. And so you're going to end up leveraging a lot more mind moments than you are body moments, because they're the things that you lean into, and it's going to end up, again, feeding that narrative. Like, mechanic and narratives are inseparable in this game.
Yeah. Last things before your voice goes entirely. He's clearly been doing no talking this weekend at all. I want to say the Amoeba race. It was my favourite. I know I said that a few minutes ago. You want to give a quick overview as to why I think that's awesome?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the species in our world are wholly original as well. That's just another thing that we were really interested in, is creating dynamic and interesting species. And one of the things we decided really early on was there was a bunch of them that we wanted to move away from humanoid form. Because a lot of the time I find with an alien, well, everything in life is always told through a human lens with us, because we are humans. This is how we refer to the world. This is how we understand the world. So we wanted to kind of move away from that and ask ourselves, what does it mean to be alien and foreign? So we ended up creating things that are non-humanoid. And we got this species called the Ionori. And they are essentially an amoeba that's about this big, if you think about it, made up of several cores. And the innermost core is like a really tough gelatinous material that has about 18 nodes in it. And those nodes function both as brain and organ. And then outside of that is kind of a viscous layer of this like almost biofluid. And they use that biofluid to breathe, to like soak up oxygen and dismantle it from the air. They also use it to soak up nutrients, so anything that gets trapped in the biofluid slowly gets dissolved and absorbed. But it's also their waste products as well, so they push stuff out. It's how they secrete. But the really cool thing about them is they originally existed in pools of this biofluid, and they were trapped inside these giant pools on their planet. And over time, that pool itself ended up growing a superconscious. So the pool ended up growing almost like its own version of an Ionori, and it grew like nodes in there, and it has its own superconsciousness that extends across the entire mother pool. But it's not exactly a consciousness, like it's not alive, but it has real basic instincts that it will reset them back to. So eventually they ended up developing technology, and they ended up augmenting their bodies with robotic frames. So they're like a little amoebas that sit inside jars inside a big robotic frame. And as they leave the pool, they will, the instincts will start to grow, and they'll start to develop like anything. They'll start to learn, they'll grow impulses, they'll kind of develop their neuroplasticity, and they'll end up becoming independent. But the mother pool views that as deviancy. And so they will end up sending out other Ionori to drag them back to the mother pool, force them back into the mother pool to reset all of their instincts and return them back to their basic form. And then when they leave again, if they stay outside of the pool for too long, they end up becoming more deviant, and some of them really want to stay in that deviant form because it has individuality, it has characteristic, they get to be their own sovereign thing, but others find safety in being reset consistently. And so there's like this really lovely tension in that society.
Yeah, very much. It's kind of more like ants and bees as opposed to the Borg, for example.
Yes.
So that's Terminus, or at least a very brief look at Terminus. We will have links to their channels. There's a download that you can have a look at, which takes you through, I think you said it was 4 sessions or so?
Roughly. Yep. Yeah, so it's roughly 4 sessions. There's a demo version up there right now, which is a kind of a shortened version of our quick start version of our rules. And then there is a campaign on there as well that'll take you about 4 sessions depending on how chaotic your team is. Because like I said, the system is very narrative focused. It wants you to explore nuances and character impulse and really kind of go into the emotional landscape of who you are, and that tends to just invent stuff for you. So while it is 4 sessions of content, if you're like by the book, to the letter, one thing after the next, you'll often find you'll end up with about 6, maybe 7 sessions if you really lean into the like kind of pure chaos of the system.
Well, players never get distracted by things, so clearly that will never happen.
Yeah, so we're looking at 4 sessions of content then, yeah.
Thank you very much, Murray. I'll let you rest your voice.
Thank you.
About 2 or 3 minutes after we finished this conversation, Murray and his colleagues realised that they'd missed probably the most important and exciting part about the game. But because at this point I'd already had the conversation previously, and I'd actually been through and had a demo of the game as well, I felt pretty confident that I could actually explain this part myself and actually fill in the gaps. So, now I'm going to explain to you about the understanding. One of the big points of difference for this game is the negotiation that takes place at the actual table. it's not just a matter of that the game master determines everything that happens and has the final say. There's actually a negotiation that happens at the table as well. The example that Murray likes to give is that you're traveling through like a desert planet and there's this big giant gap that you've got to try and get across. And you decide that you're going to try and jump this gap. Now, the GM looking at that decides, well, that's probably a very difficult thing to do. But your character grew up on this planet. You've been going through these ravines your whole life. Surely you're kind of used to this. It should be much easier. Whereas originally it was kind of being suggested that you probably need to get at least a 15 for this. You're trying to argue that, well, no, I lived here my whole life. Surely I should be able to get it on a 5 or a 6 or something. And then the negotiation takes place and maybe you meet in the middle somewhere. I am sure that Murray would have explained it better than I did just then. It came up in the game quite significantly quite a few times. Every single time that you were coming across a challenge, you could explain how it is that you want to do it, what skill it is that you want to use for that, why it works, and why it is that it should be better or harder. And it's not just you, it's everybody else at the table as well. Does it necessarily mean that you always get your way? No, of course not. But the thing I really liked about this, from a player perspective, it gives me more connection with the GM. It's not just a matter of, well, the GM is really good at telling stories. I really appreciate the story. The GM actually feels like a bigger part of the game. Not that I'm saying the GMs are not big parts of the game. I'm not saying that. But the dynamic in this is very, very different because of the negotiation that takes place at the table. On the website, I put the QR code up here. You can download the players pack. It's a quick start guide to the game. It includes the actual campaign that we were demoing at the event itself. So you and your friends can run through it. I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Have a read through. It's a very basic version of the game so far, but I would highly recommend it. You've made it through to the end of another video. Your next mission is to hit subscribe and comment down below. If you'd like to reach out to the team, consider doing that, gettingtabled@gmail.com. Consider subscribing to our Patreon. For only $2 a month, you get early access to almost every single video that we do. Our most active social media is facebook.com/gettingtabled. It's where you'll find everything first. There's also a Discord. There's an invite on screen right now. If you type that in, it'll give you instant access. If you're on Twitter or Instagram, you can find us at gettingtabled. It's not the most active, but it's something we're trying to use more all the time. Come and check out Jason the Bruce at Twitch. He does both video game and hobby content. And of course, without question, play more.